Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. What if I told you that a 14th century scholar completely mapped out the real estate markets, inflation crises, and eventual collapse of modern cities? Well, he did. Long before modern economics or urban sociology were even a thing, a brilliant thinker named Ibn Khaldun wrote this foundational text called the Muqaddimah. And in it, he lays out this incredibly detailed, almost biological life cycle of how human settlements rise, boom, and inevitably decay. To really grasp this theory, we're going to track the strict biological life cycle of human civilization. We'll start out on a dusty nomadic plain with origins, move into planning and monuments, hit the economic peak in economics, confront the deadly paradox of success, and finally, face the inevitable collapse.
Section 1. Origins. From dust to dynasties. Our journey actually begins before a single brick is even laid. We're out in the harshness of the desert, where survival is quite literally the only thing that matters.
This perfectly contrasts the very foundation of Ibn Khaldun's theory. You got the rugged, survival-focused nomadic life, which always comes before the luxury-obsessed urban life. You see, humans first band together out of pure necessity. We share resources, we defend each other, and we live rough. But the ultimate goal of all that hardship? It's to eventually secure enough wealth and stability to settle down indoors. Bedouin life is the precursor. Urban life, well, that's the culmination. Now here's a massive takeaway from the early chapters of his work. Cities don't just magically happen by accident. You might think people just wander into a nice valley and say, hey, let's build a town. But Ibn Khaldun argues that you absolutely need the massive, coercive power of a royal dynasty to force people together. It takes a king or a seriously powerful central authority to organize the labor, manage the resources, and build the massive protective walls you need to actually transition from a roaming tribe to a sedentary urban population. Moving on to Section 2, planning, the rules of the real estate game. So, the dynasty has established its power, and it's time to build. And what's wild is how much this ancient urban planning mirrors the zoning laws we use today. Check out these 5 absolutely crucial environmental requirements. Ibn Khaldun laid out these strict rules if a city is going to survive. You need flowing water and arable soil for farming, obviously. You need good pasture for livestock and natural defenses. But look at number 5, fresh air. He explicitly pointed out that stagnant air in a poorly located town literally breeds plague and disease. Basically, if a founder ignores the geographic reality, the city is doomed before the paint dries. To back this up, he looks at early Arab conquerors who built cities like Kufa and Kairouan based on, well, what was good for their camels. They completely ignored the need for farming and fresh water. Because they took a nomadic mindset and tried to apply it to urban planning, those settlements suffered incredibly swift urban decay. They just couldn't sustain themselves once the initial ruling power faded away. Which brings us to Section 3, monuments, building beyond lifespans. Once a city is properly planned and hits that booming growth phase, the skyline changes dramatically. The rulers want to leave their legacy. It's fascinating because colossal architecture, we're talking the great mosques or the massive Marib Dam in Yemen, requires multiple generations of royal power and wealth to finish. Think about it. A single ruler simply doesn't live long enough, and they usually don't possess enough continuous wealth to finish a megastructure all by themselves. It demands a stable dynasty that can seamlessly pass the architectural baton down the family line. You know, people in the 14th century, heck, even people today, often look at ancient ruins and think, no way humans did this, giants must have built it. But Ibn Khaldun actively debunks that myth. He proves these monuments are just the result of huge human cooperation, advanced engineering like pulley systems, and generational dynasty power, drafting massive labor forces from across entire regions. All right, Section 4, Economics 14th Century Price Theory. Let's fast forward to the economic peak of our city and look at this incredibly modern take on inflation. This is a total masterclass in supply and demand. Just look at the stark contrast in pricing. In a rural village, food essentials are scarce, so they're expensive. But in a massive city, because absolutely everyone needs essentials, the vast agricultural supply networks actually make them super cheap. On the flip side, the rich urban elites drive up the demand for luxuries, things like rare fruits, fine meats, and specialized labor, which pushes those prices absolutely through the roof. To really put this staggering urban wealth into perspective, Historical records from his sources mention that Baghdad, at its absolute peak, supported 65,000 public bathhouses. I mean, just imagine the sheer scale of specialized labor, the crazy water routing, and the economic output needed to sustain that level of everyday urban comfort. So the key takeaway here is that high city prices aren't just magic. They're driven by fierce competition among the wealthy for scarce, skilled labor. But you know what the real killer is? Government taxes. As the city grows, the government bloats. They slap heavy customs and taxes on the markets, and then merchants pass those costs directly onto the consumers, driving inflation even higher. Sound familiar? Which brings us to Section 5, the paradox, hadara. What actually happens when a city becomes a little too successful? When it has all the bathhouses, the towering monuments, and the booming economy? We hit this massive paradox that Ibn Khaldun called hadara. Hadara translates to urban civilization and luxury. It's the ultimate goal. It is what every society strives for. And yet, the very luxury that a civilization works so hard to achieve is exactly the thing that makes its people soft, complacent, and destined to fall. Comfort literally replaces courage. This shift in human psychology is the beating heart of his entire theory. The immense wealth of the city fundamentally changes the people living in it. The leaders become completely addicted to their lavish lifestyles, and to pay for it, they're forced to tax the population mercilessly. These crushing taxes destroy the incentive to work, they bankrupt the working class, and they completely shred the social fabric that built the city in the first place. And that leads us into Section 6, collapse, the inevitable rot. The golden age is officially over. It's a brutal domino effect. As the dynasty weakens from all that corruption and financial strain, the population actually begins to drop. People are fleeing the crushing taxes. Well, with fewer people, overall demand falls. When demand falls, specialized labor disappears because craftsmen just can't make a living anymore. And without those skilled craftsmen to maintain things, the physical real estate of the city quite literally begins to crumble into dust. And then comes the final, fatal blow. From a purely sociological standpoint, Ibn Khaldun notes that when the city is weak enough, rugged nomadic groups sweep back in and take over. But because their entire nature is focused on basic outdoor survival, they unintentionally destroy whatever infrastructure is left. We're talking about them taking stones from beautiful palaces to use as cooking pots, and ripping out expensive roof beams to use as tent poles. The cycle returns right back to the dust where it started. Which leaves us with a truly profound realization. Ibn Khaldun wrote chapters upon chapters of this over 600 years ago, yet his blueprint of real estate, inflation, zoning, and social collapse feels unbelievably modern. So as you look at the skyrocketing prices, the heavy taxation, and shifting populations in our own cities today, I'm going to leave you to wonder, where exactly do we sit on Ibn Khaldun's timeline? Are we still building our great monuments, or are we already watching the infrastructure crumble? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.